G'day friends, Malloy here. Today we are starting with part 2 of our offensive synergies series. We are gonna dive right in and get going here. And thanks to Sape for leading this discussion.
Hey, it's going to be covering the most important element of maximizing group damage in 6-person and 12-person groups, which is what the DPS classes themselves actually do, and how they synergize, and how they should prioritize their skill sequences, as well as we're going to cover in detail Call to Greatness, and the most valuable important skill in the game. Without further ado, I'm going to start covering Red Minstrel, not only because it has Call to Greatness, but because it has the most group utility offensively of any class of DPSers that provide an enormous amount of DPS, especially in 6-person groups, assuming that you don't have also a blue minstrel, which is not ideal. In 6-person groups, especially, you want to have a spec where you have all 5 anthems available to you. You can spec out of prowess if you don't have any melee or physical classes, but you should have either a red captain or a blue mariner, and you should usually have a berg. So this is still, even if both your DPS are tactical, then this is still a valuable anthem as well. But you are responsible in the 6-person groups, assuming you don't have a blue minstrel, for all 5 anthems, and well, 4 of them are offensive. Anthem of Composure is defensive, and unless the group is taking an immense amount of tactical damage at the beginning of the fight, and you want to get up your anthems as quickly as possible so that in a specific sequence, and this is quite difficult to understand at first, but we will put up a graphic of the sequence of how you can get up 3 anthems, um, very often at least 3 anthems in less than 3 seconds, and proceed into um, putting up your damage over time and target resist rating debuff that it stays on the enemy. It's a toggle skill, timeless echoes of battle, as well as your whenever you have stacks of, as I will demonstrate here, ballads that tier up emboldening finish to 5. Okay, then you use Code of Fury, applies 5% outgoing damage buff to everyone in 30 meters for 30 seconds. So you want to use that at tier 5 before the burn phase begins. You also want to use Call of Arome for the negative 2.5% tactical mitigation, and you want to keep that on cooldown basically as well. And you want to have the anthem, or the ballad rather, buffs up of, as you see here, tactical damage from minor ballad being traded into perfect performance, minor ballad, and perfect ballad gives a huge amount of, see, tactical damage and incoming healing, 4.5%. And War Speech provides even more tactical damage. You should just be spamming basically almost all the time both of your ballads as a red minstrel. It's necessary. So anyway, it's most important first to get up anthems. If you're in a 6-person group, for sure, then the first thing that you should do is before the fight goes in, you should be before the fight begins, you should be spec'd in 3 points into word spreads in yellow, um, where rank 3 of it increases single target skill of allies protected by any of your bubbles. And your bubbles, you should use Song of the Hammerhand, which is your personal one, before the fight begins, because you can, and it applies a buff of plus 10% single target attack damage for 30 seconds. And then you have Gift of the Hammerhand, which you should use after your anthem sequence has finished. And generally, because it lasts 15 seconds and applies to 3 fellows, what you want to do is target the highest DPS and use it on them as soon as Othes is called, so that they and the 2 closest fellowship members to them, and it only in raids it only will target members within their fellowship, but the DPS should, for the most part, all be in one group. So you should target, generally it's going to be the red Loremaster that's going to do the most damage during burn phases because of Nature's Fury coinciding with Othes. So it's a good idea to either have them tooltipped or just click them and use Gift of the Hammerhand to give them and 2 others a huge buff to their damage as well. And that will, if you are close to them though, you should ideally get step slightly to the side so that you don't get hit by the Gift of the Hammerhand, and you keep your Song of the Hammerhand buff, assuming that you're using Othes 8 to 10 seconds into the fight, which is just the assumption that I'm going to be going with on each of these. I cover each of these classes. So, start out before the fight, and then you begin to get your anthems up as quickly as possible. So you only need one ballad to use Anthem of Dissonance, and in 6-person groups, if you're on the DPS, then you definitely want to use Anthem of Dissonance first. And then you want to use Anthem of the Free Peoples. In 12-person groups, you want to have a different spec where you're not spec'd into Anthem of the Free Peoples, and because assuming that you have a blue minstrel, they should be taking care of Free Peoples as well as prowess and composure, and you don't need to spec into any of those so that you can do more damage. In a 6-person group, you want to use Fire Ballad into Anthem of Dissonance, which you can cut with, okay, so this is a little bit complicated. Your anthems have pretty long animations that need to be cut with skills that are immediate if you want to get them up as quickly as possible. Also, while Cry of the Chorus resets your anthem cooldown, it's an immediate skill, so it will cut the animation of anthems. It has a pretty long animation itself, which also needs to be cut in order to optimize damage. So, optimize speed of which you can get into the damage phase after applying your anthems. So, a minor ballad after you've already used your group bubble, into, I'm going to do this slowly at first. Dissonance, cut, cut, three people's cut, coda, and if coda resets, it didn't, and it didn't again. If you're spec 3 points into improved coda of fury, then it has a 50% chance to reset all cries and calls, including there. I got reset. So once again, cut, and then use Anthem of War, assuming that you're not in a heavily physical group, in which case you should use Prowess first. But War, in addition to giving more ranged and tactical damage, will provide for 10 seconds a big self buff to your crit chance, especially for Coda. So you want to use that prior to, and then maybe reapply it during burn phases. So that's the priority. You can only get up one or two, two or possibly three, depending on your luck with Coda resetting. Drive the course again. Before um, before burn phases, you can only get up to 3 anthems. If you have a blue minstrel and if you're in a raid, then you only have to worry about 2. They should be taking care of prowess into free peoples. And so you should go dissonance into war. Then you want to put up timeless echoes of battle, and you want to up your mid shred, which is Call of Arome. You want to keep that on cooldown, and because using ballads will decrease the cooldown of all calls and cries by 1 second each. It has a 10-second cooldown and a 10-second duration on the debuff. You can actually layer 2 of the debuffs for 3 or so seconds and get 5%, negative 5% tactical mitigation, and that's AoE. And you want to, as I said, target the highest DPS when Oathies is called, and use Gift of the Hammerhand on them, and hopefully not be, hopefully take a few steps away so that you still have Song of the Hammerhand buff on you and it doesn't override it. And then you want to use Coda of Fury. Well, you want to use Coda after you have 5 stacks of Emboldening finish. So you want to use 5 ballads in a row without using Coda, and then use Coda also in the opening sequence. This is partially, like, this class more than any other except maybe Red Captain has more setup required for optimizing damage than any other, which is why you seconds, sometimes up to 15 before you start the burn phase. You want to be able to optimize, and you want the Red Minstrel to have all of their anthems that they can get up, as well as all of the buffs and the mid shred, and the bubbles, just all of it, and be able to then also participate in the burst phase as well. And if you don't know Red Minstrel prioritization and rotation of skills, it's quite simple, especially for single target. During the burst phase, you're going to want to be using Coda of Fury on cooldown and always cutting it, animation cutting it with Piercing Cry. You're going to want to be spamming both ballads because every time they crit, you get Piercing Cry cooldown is reset. And you want to, when it is reset, I'll just demonstrate quickly here. Alright, first get up anthems. Right, so you see how I've got 3 anthems up, and then you put up Timeless Echoes of Battle, Arome, get Emboldening Finish, up to tier 5, Coda, and it didn't go off, I lagged it there, but cut. Okay, reset Piercing Cry, and every time you get a reset Piercing Cry, then you want to use one of your big skills and cut it. And if you're the only red minstrel in the group, then you can reapply anthems, or you can apply the other anthems, I should say. Um, anyway, I was slow. I'm not trying to maximize damage here. I'm trying to just demonstrate what you want to do, ideally. And that was for single target. For AoE situations, where it's very important to do as much damage as possible to everything, then you want to adjust your skill priorities a bit and use uh, Cry of the Wizards, Cry of the Valar, and Call of the Second Age, and you also want to cut them, ideally, as much as possible, and you don't want to use Call to Fate. And so, yeah, that's the Red Minstrel setup, as well as the just like basic, like what you do to cause the most damage during turn windows, especially. Now, moving on to Call to Greatness. This is the most important skill in the entire game. And you need to know, and everyone else needs to know, which skills it resets and the exact details of them, what they do, um, like their cooldowns, their durations, etc. Um, you want to make sure that you use you have a plan for when to use Call to Greatness, and that you use the skill that it resets, um, no matter who, like what class you're on, what spec, that you use it before Call to Greatness, because Call to Greatness resets its cooldown and gives it to you again. So, as I go through the other DPS classes, I will be uh, going into more detail about how they should use their skill that's reset by Call to Greatness at the beginning. But as a Red Minstrel, you actually like have a very weak skill being reset by Call to Greatness, arguably the weakest, which is I have the Wizards. It is not necessary to use that before Call to Greatness unless you are uh, in, unless you're doing burn phases that include a lot of uh, enemies that need to be taken down quickly, AoE. Um, so, um, it has a 7-minute cooldown, and it only has a 25-meter radius, which you need to take into account. Some fights will demand that people spread out um, to where you won't always be able to hit, like you'll have to miss somebody with it. But you should try to run to be able to hit everyone, ideally, whenever you use it. And keep in mind, when you do use it, that you should give a countdown of at least 3 seconds so that everybody who still has the skill that it resets available can use it before you use Call to Greatness. So typically, it will be the raid leader or the minstrel will say CTG 3, 2, 1. And then keep in mind that when you do use it, it has an animation of over a second unless you cut it. And I'm not going to be able to demonstrate cutting it and how you can make it go off instantly, but you just use an immediate skill. So Piercing Cry, Quarter of My Salvation, Gift of the Hammerhand, all of those work um, to make it go off immediately. And you want to, in 6-person groups, generally use this uh, pretty much 3 to 5 seconds after Wolfies is called to give everybody, all the DPS, their biggest skills back to be used again uh, like during burn window, and to be put on cooldown as quickly as possible, to be used a third time as soon as possible. And then it also resets for tanks, and for the most part, their most potent defensive skill. So they should go in their most potent defensive skill before Call to Greatness, obviously. And then for healers, um, their most potent group heal is reset by Call to Greatness. So they should use it as well. And then Oathies and Bothies and Crothies, as it's called for Blue Loremaster, are reset by Call to Greatness. So as soon as the debuff that I covered in, not debuff, the effect that's applied to the target I covered in part 1, whenever you use one of those big skills, Red Captain, Oathies, Blue Mariner, Breaking of something called, aka Bothies, and then Blue Loremaster's Raven skill, uh, just referred to as Crothies. So when you use one of those big skills um, on the target, immediately it gets an effect the last 90 seconds called Renewed Defenses that prevents you from using one of those skills on it again. All of those skills have longer cooldowns than 90 seconds, and so resetting them with Call to Greatness will allow them to be used as soon as Renewed Defenses expires. Something very important to note and to track is that, especially when you have, well, really only when you have multiple minstrels in a group, and in the meta right now, you should have both a red and a blue minstrel. Once you do use Call to Greatness, everyone affected by it gets an effect called Exhausted, which is different than the effect that I covered in the Red Captain Blue Mariner section, Exhaustion. And like, you don't want to confuse them. They're both very important effects that prevent you from overlapping very potent skills. Everyone gets an effect for 2 minutes called Exhaustion that prevents these another Call to Greatness from being used. But after 2 minutes expires, um, after the first one, then if you have a second minstrel, then they can use theirs as well. And in some fights, you want to do that to, you know, burn things down as quickly as possible. Sometimes you want to save Call to Greatness. You always want a plan for Call to Greatness, and you want to announce it before you want the raid leader to lay it out before you go into a fight, especially if you're progging and people don't know the strategy that you're going to use, already. If you're farming, it's not, you don't have to necessarily do it. But this is so critical of a skill to optimizing not only offensive potency of a group, but defensive as well. It makes Minstrel the most important class to have in a 6-person group or a raid, like period. It alone. You want a minstrel and you want 2 in a raid, um, at least ideally for Call to Greatness. Um, like everything else aside, the bubbles, the anthems, the cleanse, the group cleanse, the in combat res, uh, everything else aside, and the buffs from Coda and ballads, the debuff from um, the mid shred from called a Rome. Call to Greatness alone is important enough, and then I'm waiting for it to come back up just to show you the effects and also how it can be cut, and then I'm going to swap classes. But yeah, Red Minstrel is very, very vital in the meta, especially now, and especially in high and mid tier raids to bring along. And it should also be noted that you need to establish if you have a red and a blue minstrel in the group, which you should in a raid, which of them should use Call to Greatness first. And in general, it's the blue minstrel because they will be having like you'll be using it like during the burn phase, um, and in a raid generally that will come after Oathies is used, um, which see part 1 uh, to uh, to understand how extended burn phases work. But in a 6-person group, it will generally be used after the red captain or blue mariner uses Oathies or Bothies a few seconds after. And the blue minstrel should um, use theirs first in a raid. And then you get the effect. Um, okay, exhausted, and you do not want to use the other Call to Greatness until this has expired. If you do, then it doesn't work, and you just wasted the most important skill in the game. So, very, very important to track that. Like, especially if you're a raid leader, but if you're a minstrel, just I think everyone really should track exhausted. Um, and as I noted, you should have 2 specs, one for maximum damage that doesn't have Anthem of Composure or Prowess traded, and arguably you can take out Anthem Free Peoples as well, but that doesn't give you access to Tale of Tales. But yeah, the Blue Minstrel should be handling at least Prowess and Composure, um, and usually Free Peoples as well, so that you can focus more on doing damage than having to establish and keep up anthems. Um, so have 2 specs, one for when you're the only minstrel, and one for when you have a blue minstrel in your group. So next, I'm going to cover Red Loremaster. You have the most burst damage in the entire game, with a tiny exception of Red Champion in a very niche situation that I'll explain whenever I get to Champion. But you have the most damage that you can that anyone can do by far during burn phases. And so what you want to do prior, like at the beginning of a fight, is not nearly as important as far as like your setup um, as what you do right before Oathies is called. And then like during the Oathies, and especially if you're in a raid with both a red captain and blue mariner, the extended burn phase. So you have a lot of powerful damage over time skills. You have a lot of powerful AoE skills that, and you have a very important self buff that also provides an AoE debuff that is incredibly valuable. You have, like all classes do, a mid tread, which Burning Embers, Sticky Gourd, and Burning Gale, which is what Gust of Wind turns into with when you use Nature's Fury. They all apply a negative 3% Tacmit and Vismit AoE. Well, single target for Burning Embers, AoE for Sticky Gourd and Burning Gale. Mitigation Shred. So you generally, especially if there's more than one target, want to start out with Sticky Gourd to apply that mitigation shred to everything. If there's only one target though, as you see, Sticky Gourd has a tremendous amount of dot damage for 16 seconds. And so you want to actually start with Burning Embers into Wizard's Fire into Staff Sweep, and you want to use Staff Sweep. You want to track it, like its duration, and depending on your spec, it's either going to the crit chance is either going to last 22 or 18 seconds. But you always want to keep that up. It has other utility, but you can see the Loremaster video that I made to learn more about that. However, you have also a very important role, and this should just be passive as long as you're using Staff Sweep to keep up your buff. After you use if you use a fire skill and then follow it with Staff Sweep, and a debuff is applied called Brittle Frost, which is 35 seconds if you are spec'd into, and 20 seconds if you're not, and instead go with Shield of Knowledge. But you want to always keep that up. And it's obviously because Staff Sweep is AoE, max targets of 5 without the AoE target count trace tree. So yeah, that's very important. And it also can be applied by Rune Keeper's Flurry of Words. So if you're a Rune Keeper and don't have a red Loremaster in the group, then that will be up to you to apply and keep up, especially during burn phases. So you generally want to start out with Sticky Gourd, but if it's just single target, then Burning Embers into Wizard's Fire, Staff Sweep, and if you have the two-set Ikrabani bonus, then Staff Sweep applies flanked, and you want to use while flanked is up. Once again, see the Red Loremaster video for more information. Use Lightning Charge Staff Strike. And you want to just generally prepare for the burn window to come. Like you should probably be able to get off 2 Lightning Charge Staff Strikes to improved ignition tier 3s before it comes. And before it comes, you want to use, well, Ring of Fire, because for 15 seconds it does a tremendous amount of damage, and burn phases last 15 seconds. You want to use Sticky Gourd, because you want that spot for 16 seconds. So you want to use both of them, and then you want to summon your links if it's single target, Sabretooth if it is an AoE fight with more than 3 targets, And right before Nature's Fury, you apply Staff Sweep buff. Unless you have at least 15 seconds still left on it. As soon as Oathies is used, Nature's Fury, Low Cut, Burning Gale, Lightning Storm, Low Cut again. See the Loremaster guide for more information about what I just did. I actually did it a little bit slowly, so I only got 2 low pressures. But Call to Greatness will reset Nature's Fury, and when it does, you want to, especially if you're in a raid and Blue Banner uses both these, use it again, and try to get in 3 low pressures. I'm going to wait for it to come back up to demonstrate how to do that. But have all of those going, and also in the meantime, I was going a little bit slowly. You can get in another improved ignition tier 3 during Nature's Fury, besides the 2 that are applied by Gust of Wind, uh, burning burning gale rather, and cashed out with lightning skills. It's very difficult though, without double tap animation cutting. It's impossible without double tap animation cutting one of the low pressures to get in 3 low pressures and 3 improved ignition tier 3s during that 15-second window. Um, so it's almost back up, and so I see that the cooldown remaining is 10 seconds. This is about the time where I'm going to get my staff sweep up, Ring of Fire, board, and then Lynx and Nature's Fury. Uh, Lagging, so missed it. Well, all right, and you can fit in if as long as you toggle um, low pressure immediately and appropriately double tap. You can get 3 low pressures in. Um, so that's um, basically the extent of for especially single target what you want to do during burn phases, and you want to often use Call of the Valar to reset both Lightning Storm and Sticky Gourd, and use both of them again. Like once Sticky Gourd's dot expires, use it again during extended burn phases with groups with both Red Cappy and Blue Mariner, and to especially in AoE situations, you get another Lightning Storm to cash out Burning Gales, your um, Searing Embers into improved ignition tier 3 on all enemies. And rather than using a third low pressure, if it is an AoE situation and you want to end Nature's Fury with Power of Destruction, assuming that you have the 4-set EMK Great Gear, because as long as you use it before that 15 seconds of Nature's Fury expires, then for the entire duration, it will get buff of plus 5% crit chance and plus 5% or plus 15% lightning type damage, which is what it is, on it for its entire 5.5-second channel duration. So AoE, that will be more powerful than getting in a third low pressure at the very end of Nature's Fury. Um, and in AoE also, rather than trying to get in a third improved ignition tier 3, you should probably use Cracked Earth and Ints Go to War, or um, double tap Lava Rising Dawn to do that rather than low pressure. And because you're not using a third low pressure, um, you're using Power of Destruction at the end, that will optimize AoE damage during burn phases. Alright, Red Champ is next, and it's actually very simple. You have a lot of self buffs, but your offensive contribution is really only significant to physical classes. Um, so in the tactical meta, champs aren't generally brought to raids, but they can do more single target damage than most red minis, and have the highest burst damage window in the entire game, which I'll get to shortly with the appropriate stat bonus. But anyway, you want to, before the fight starts, use Battle Frenzy um, about 5 to 7 seconds before it begins. And as you're going in, you want to use Champion's Duel because it is reset by a Call to Greatness. It lasts 30 seconds, and it gets more powerful as it tiers up over the course of that 30 seconds. For more information, you can check the Red Champion guide video that I made, along with Brim. And that was a really fun one. But you want to save your other buffs in a raid for when the extended burn phase begins, because they last 30 seconds as well. 2 of them at least, controlled burn and fight on, and you want them to be up throughout the duration of Bothies and Bothies. In 6-person groups, though, you want to use them at the beginning, and then you want to use True Heroics if the target, if your target is not going to breach 20% morale within the first minute and 50 seconds. If you have the 2-set Ikrabani bonus, and 2 minutes if you don't. You need to use it whenever Champion's Duel has tiered up as much as possible. It lasts 12 seconds and is a significant buff itself. And you want to apply it when everything else is running. So your self buffs are way more important than your actual skill usage prior to and during burn phases. You want to start out, as far as skills go, you want to go in with Champion's Duel, use Devastating Blow, Blade Wall, and I'm doing this slowly. Then you want to go Ferocious, Cut. Okay, that really lagged. Brutal, Cut, Swift into Remorseless, and just Punishing Blow, and do your rotation basically. Alright, you want to always keep up. You want to always keep up the 30-second 5% Fizmet Shred from Blade Wall, which is AoE 5 targets, but still keep it up on target at all times. But you only want to use, especially on a single target, Blade Wall or that debuff. So you want to track it and don't let it fall off. You want to use Devastating Strike on cooldown because of the plus 10% incoming melee damage debuff that it applies for 8 seconds, so 80% of the time. And you want to try to, right before the burn phase begins, and during the burn phase, whenever the buff from Wild Attack critting expires, use Wild Attack, hoping that it crits, and track it didn't crit there. So I'm going to use it again. Oh, it didn't crit again. Okay, there we go. Improved Wild Attack. If you're spec'd into that, normally it crits about 75% of the time because it has two. Anyway, that was just irregular. But if you are spec'd into 5 points into Wild Swings, not only does it do more damage, but it increases crit chance by 5% for 10 seconds. So you want that buff up before the burn phase and ideally throughout it. And then you have the option of, if you want to really optimize group damage, and in certain fights, I do swap this in. Like lose a tracery, word of mastery that won't be useful for that fight. Like you may not need sprint, you may not need raging blade damage, if it's single target, etc. Um, lose one of them instead for the tracery Horn of Gondor. No, not shared storage, vault. Horn of Gondor damage and mitigation debuff, and that makes Horn of Gondor apply to all the enemies that it hits, max 5 targets in an 8 meter radius. A 2.2 percent mit tread of both physical and tactical damage for 12 seconds. So you can use that prior to the burn phase, and then again once it expires to just optimize group damage if you have that tracery slotted. And if you know that a big burn window is coming, where the boss is going to be particularly vulnerable to damage. For instance, like the best example is Umshara, the final boss of DMK. During execute phase, you only have 10-second windows to do as much damage as possible. And during that time, like right before those windows come, right before you use a fellowship maneuver to open it up, you want to use Horn of Gondor before, as well as okay. You've got as I mentioned before, the most potent, that I won't be able to display here, but I will describe the most potent amount of burst single target at least damage in the game, in a niche situation with the 6-set bonus from DMK Red Gear. While True Heroics is active, strikes will reset the cooldown of Punishing Blow, and True Heroics will, if you use it once a target drops below 20% morale, then you can use Punishing Blow, and every strike skill will reset it. So you can go Punishing Blow, Swift Strike, Punishing Blow, Devastating Strike, Punishing Blow, Ferocious, Cut, Punishing Blow, Brutal, Cut, Punishing Blow, Remorseless, Punishing Blow, Swift, Punishing Blow. You get the idea. And you can just spam Punishing Blow and do such a tremendous amount of damage, especially if you have made sure that before you use it, Blade Wall has been refreshed, or at least still has 12 seconds on its duration. And as long as you continue to make sure that you use Devastating Strike on cooldown. And you should ideally save your buffs to where during the 30-second duration of controlled burn and fight on, the, that 12-second window is going to be active, and they will be active during it, I should say. And then Champions Duel, you also want to save, but use about 15 seconds before you predict the target is going to hit that 20% morale threshold. And sometimes you will, like if you're tracking renewed defenses, or if you have a CTG available, sometimes you won't want to use True Heroics until the target is, you know, well below 20% morale. Um, it's it requires quite a bit of foresight to truly optimize, but yeah, at the very end of the target's life, the enemy's life, you can do, at least for 12 seconds, the most damage of any, most single target damage of any class in the game, and you should if you have the appropriate uh, set bonuses. Next, Hunter, Red Hunter. All right. So you can check the Red Hunter guide that we posted for more information, but I'm going to try to quickly cover it as well, as far as how to optimize burn phases and how to set it up for them. So, burn hot is reset by Call to Greatness, and if Call to Greatness is going to be used in the first 20 seconds of the fight, then use it at the very beginning. But be careful with aggro, uh, potentially at the beginning. Um, so you want to get up your mid shred as always, which is from pin shot. You want to apply. You want to use Heart Seeker, um, but you generally want to first, if you have the 6 set DMK set bonus, then you want to get 5 stacks of Planet Draw up. If Exsanguinate procs, then you want to use it, but you generally want to use it during burn phases as well. You want to keep up Fast Draw, Tier 3, so, and Planet Draw, Tier 5. You want to have your bleeds going, so Exsanguinate and Heartseeker, and then Barbed Arrow, and transition at that point into, well, after first using Improved Swift Bow to try to get a proc, a Merciful Shot proc. Use Barbed Arrow as your final focus builder, and your first focus spender should be Pin Shot if you have the 2 set Ikrabani bonus, which makes it, which if you've used Barbed Arrow and then follow it with Pin Shot, as you can see here, get an extra attack called Bleeding Puncture, an extra dot, in addition to Barbed Arrows. That does a tremendous amount of damage. And then at that point, you should be, it should basically be time for Oathies. If not, then wait and, you know, maybe use Pen Shot a few more times or whatever. But before Oathies comes, you want to have 3 stacks of volleys up, meaning have used 3. Focus spender skills. Once again, check the Hunter Guide for more information. And then during the burn phase, you want to, for the majority of it at least, stay in focus spender mode with 3 stacks of volley, not using any focus builders, and for about 10 seconds, do as much damage as possible, hopefully getting in 2 upshots, um, and paying attention to your focus, and use, for instance, improved intent concentration to get back full focus and get in a second upshot before ending your focus spender stage with your hardest hitting available focus spend focus builder, which will erase your volley stacks. And by this point, Heartseeker should be back up, so you should use Heartseeker ideally. And if you toggle auto attack off, then actually the first and second um, focus spender focus builder skills that you use after volley stacks, after the focus spender stage. So when you use like Heartseeker to erase the volley stacks damage buff still applies to them, and if you don't auto attack in the meantime, if you were to turn off auto attack, and I recommend keybinding that, by the way, and then use your second biggest skill. So, as far as focus builders go, um, generally swift bow or long shot, um, usually swift bow. Um, and if you don't auto attack, and at 36% damage buff from the 3 volley stacks will apply to both of the first 2 focus builders that you use, and you're probably at that point going to want to reapply the buffs from quick shot, get your focus back up, use especially if the target is above 50% morale, which during opening burn phases it's almost always going to be. Still at this point, use swift bow over long shot to hopefully proc merciful shot, and then get back as quickly as you can barbed arrow into your focus spender phase. Once again, check the Hunter video for more information, and in AoE situations, um, basically it's simpler. You do the same setup sequence, and then once Oathies is once the burn phase begins, you try to stay in for roughly 10-second periods, and then alternate into like 3 or 4 second periods of focus spender using your rain of arrows, split shot, low cut, um, and keeping up the mid tread from pin shot, and then exsanguinate for its dot especially, and then you know back into focus builder and rinse and repeat. Next is red Beorning. There are a ton of skills that you need to use both before burn phases, like at the beginning, a ton of offensive utility that Red Bear provides, as well as a lot of bleeds that you want, long-lasting bleeds that you want to establish before burn phases begin, at least as many as possible. Um, and then several substantial self buffs as well. Bear is one of the Red Bear is one of the classes that needs the most time to prepare in order to really optimize damage, and that it's one of the reasons why waiting at least 8 seconds before throwing Oathies is the way to go. So we've got as far as the offensive debuffs, same as 3 at least are the same as blue and well, what yellow used to have, at least before the recent change this past week. But 3 of the offensive debuffs are E-Swarm, which is physical mitigation shred, as well as huge source of immediate damage and damage over time. And then Armor Crush, which is a very substantial incoming damage debuff, but only lasts 10 seconds with a 20-second cooldown, so it's very important to hold off on that one until please is prone or shortly after it, rather than using it before and not having it its full duration during these. And then there is Trample, which if you look at his LI, the Word of Mastery, gives Trample a improved Trample critical defense debuff. It makes it cause a 5% crit defense debuff. That's the teal version. The gold is 5.5. And so you want to get all of those plus one that is that's unique to red for bear, expose, which is an incredibly powerful debuff. It does, as you see in ban form there, but we'll be using it in bear form and slightly different. Incoming damage debuff to all forms of damage. And you want to get all of those up, of course, as well as the bleeds that he has over on the top left of his screen. And one of them overlaps with, Bee Swarm is also a debuff, but Lost Wipe is is a very long bleed that should use quite early. Serrated Edge, you have to swap to man form to use, but it's the second most potent bleed. If you refresh it before it expires, even though it takes a little longer to get off because you have to swap to man and back. And then Bash, finally, which is a potent bleed, but has quite a long animation. And if you don't have Vicious Claw available to cut both first skill that you want to use, which is Bee Swarm, which has a long animation, and then want to cut that with Vicious Claw, which has a 12-second cooldown. So you probably are not going to be able to use Bash before to use it and cut it before Oathies is thrown. But if you're waiting 15 seconds before Oathies, which sometimes is best in fights, then always establish your debuffs and bleeds, as well as time your buffs, which he's got on the left middle of the screen. Blood Prize is what you want to start out with. If you have the 2-set Ikribani set bonus, it lasts 40 seconds, so it should be up throughout the entirety of the extended burn phase. You can use it at the beginning, basically. And then Call to Wild is the most potent, especially with the 6-set EMK bonus. It provides a ton of breath generation, and does increases skill damage by 51% for 25 seconds, and it is reset by Call to Greatness. So if you're going to be using Call to Greatness right after Oaths is thrown, and so you're using Oaths 10 seconds in, and then Bothys 15 later. So CTG should come about 27 or so seconds into the fight. You want to use Call to Wild about 7 seconds in, so that as soon as it expires, use it again from CTG. You also always want to time your Portent of Strength with Oaths, like exactly, because they both last 15 seconds. And then Ferocious Roar, you want to use primarily for the 100% crit chance for the next attack, but also for the Wrath generation. You want to save that though for your first execute, your biggest single target attack. And of course, you shouldn't use that until Oaths is thrown, because it has a 15-second cooldown, and so you can only get one in, and during Oaths itself, and then you can get another execute after Oaths during the extended Bothys window, but you since Ferocious Roar has a 30-second cooldown, can't get another auto crit on the second one, but you won on the first one. And so pre Oaths, you also want to use Trample and Armor Crush, of course, as well as make sure that Expose is basically used on cooldown, and use your big execute and final strike skills like as quickly as possible so that you can refresh Swarm, for instance, and get back into keeping up all of the debuffs and bleeds throughout the extended burn phase. And the best way to do that is to use a Wrath potion right after first execute, and then crash into final strike. Also, it's worth noting that in order to get everything up before Oaths is thrown, generally, you have to break the rule that Red Bear typically follows of putting Thrash in between every skill and make it in between every other skill, pretty much, until everything's up. So, yeah, single target is pretty complicated for Bear, but if a proper skill sequence is used rapidly enough, Bear provides so much damage throughout the burn phase from all of its bleeds, as well as its big attacks, as well as group damage from its debuffs, that it's very important to really memorize and optimize appropriate sequence. So, Earthane, if you could just go ahead and demonstrate what that looks like. Armor Crush. Execute. Persistent. Yep. Bash into Claw. Alright. Was almost exactly optimal. Build Wrath, your final. Blood guys back again. Blood prize is up. Yep, that's basically what it looks like for single target. Sorry. And then there are just a few differences for AoE. Um, instead of um, instead of trample, as well as bash, um, swipe, uh, maul, and final strike, as well as serrated edge and savage knockdown, will take priority over even execute as well. But you still want to get up your mid treads, so these expose. Still want to use armor crush. However, you want to like probably the biggest difference in AOE is how you use Ferocious Roar in order to get pro crits. If you use it before Relentless Maul, um, and throughout the entire channel of Maul, it will keep critting. And then if you use Ferocious, or Final, rather, Strike afterwards, and it will also auto crit as long as it's been queued before Maul channel has finished. And then you want to use your Wrath Potion to get back enough to use your next biggest hitting AoE skill, Savage Knockdown, if you are traded into it. And keep in mind that Serrated Edge is is or over the course of a long AoE fight, at least, it does the most damage of any skill because it's a AoE very potent bleed. As long as you refresh it every 33 seconds, assuming that you have the Ikrabani 2 set, and 30 seconds if you don't. It's also worth noting that once you are in, once you have used your big breath spending skills, then you want to go into the sequence of always fitting Crash in between every skill that you use and using Expose on cooldown for Wrath generation, um, as well as the damage that it does, and always use Vicious Claw to cut either bees or bash, whichever one needs to be refreshed. Um, bees taking priority because those are your really the only two skills that have an animation of more than like half a second. Um, So, um, yep, that's pretty much it for Red Bear. And now, finally, for the last class that we're going to cover in Redline, as far as guessers and offensive utility, as well as how to prepare for burn phases and optimally um, form during them. And that is Red Rune Keeper. It's worth noting that it just underwent a massive change in that you can no longer double cast essay or have Smoldering Wrath be used followed by Shocking Words and have both of them like be have the 10 attunement apply to both of them without it resetting. So Red Arcade has been nerfed and as of mid-November. But the rotation is actually quite simple compared to the majority of red line classes, and you don't have to do much pre-burn phase. You just want to get up 3 tiers of Rate of Fire for tactical mitigation debuff and the damage over time. 3 tiers of Fiery Ridicule for the same thing, damage over time, and the attunement that they both provide, and then basically spam Ceaseless Argument until right before Othes, hoping to get a proc of closing remarks. Wow, I'm getting really unlucky. There's thunderous words. Okay, there's closing remarks. If you get that, wait till Othes is thrown to use Epic Conclusion. Um, and it's within the first 4 seconds after Othes is thrown, use Volcanic Runestone. Also, by the way, always cut um, Epic Conclusion with improved final word. I didn't there, but anyway, so what that looks like. So you get a proc. Okay. All right. So you want to go ideally as when you start, because with 5 tiers of Master of Connotation, um, instead of the induction of Rid of Fire, it's an instant cast. You want to go Fiery Ridicule, Rit, Fiery, Rit, Fiery, and then you're at 5 and you immediately get an instant of third Rit. Okay, and then spam Ceaseless, and then say Othes is going out now. Essay of Fire into Combustion. Throw down your runestone, and then after combustion, go with Scathing Mockery into Essence of Flame to get attunement back up for Smoldering Wrath, and then Distracting Flame and Ceaseless Argument, and also try to weave in Essence of Storm, get attunement all the way back up to use Shocking Touch. And so you're basically going through a rotation of your big dots and making sure that they're reapplied, as well as keeping the 15-second mitigation shred and dot from Rate of Fire at tier 3 up. And if you are spec'd into Essence of Flame, and you use it, you don't have to use Fiery Ridicule to refresh its tiers, and it does quite a bit of damage. You always want to use Essay of Fire now, only for combustion, because the dot from it, the last 14 seconds, times up very well with combustion's 15-second cooldown. And anytime that you get closing remarks from a combination of mostly Ceaseless Argument, but also Essence of Storm, which has a longer animation, uh, and but attunes 3 battle, whereas Ceaseless just does 1. So if you want more attunement plus a chance to get the 2 procs that cause closing remark, um, in order to use Epic Conclusion, and have it, do massive amounts of damage, then you want to weave in um, as many ceaseless arguments as you can fit, um, without having any of your dots fall off, or missing the cooldowns of um, Smoldering Wrath, Essay into Combustion, um, and then use Rinzone on cooldown. Also use it as a attunement filler, just like Distracting Flame. And every time that you see, if you are tracking it, that Master of Connotation is at tier 5, then use cast Writ. Um, and so once you are at max attunement, your priorities are, if you don't have closing remarks proc, um, it's Essay of Fire into Combustion, um, followed by skills that will get attunement back up to use Smoldering Wrath, and then more attunement back up into Shocking Words. Legit, like, your debuffs come naturally from, if you're spec properly, from Mystifying Flames and Molten Flame, as well as Weakening Red and everything. So there's not too much that you have to really deviate from, and it's also like situationally. And it's also worth noting that AoE and single target are virtually identical, as far as your rotation goes and prioritization. So Red Rune Keeper has it a little bit harder now that you have to rebuild attunement after using Smoldering Wrath, and can't just every other um, Smoldering Wrath into Shocking Words, that is. So you have to fit in a few more attunement builders. But yeah, that pretty much covers it. It's way more about what you do during the um, burn phase itself, than it is like preparing for it. Um, like I said, there are no buffs or debuffs that you have to try to get up. Um, the only exception is if for some reason you don't have a red Loremaster in the group or raid, and you don't have a blue Rune Keeper. You should often try to weave in Flurry of Words, um, like before, like right before Oathies, because even though as a red RK, you're not going to be able to fit in your allies a spot for a word of mastery that increases its incoming crit chance debuff to 5.5%. Blue RKs can, and that they should take care of that. If there's no red Loremaster, if there is a red Loremaster, then just naturally using the normal rotation, they'll always keep that up. But in case you do find yourself without either of those, like in a 6-person group, for instance, then that's the only debuff that you have to really worry about um, going out your way to use. Okay, so to wrap it up, you need to go into every fight with a plan. Everybody needs to understand that buffs and debuffs, almost all of them, stack. And in many ways, many of them, like mitigation shreds, for instance, stack cumulatively rather than additively, making them even more potent. Um, and so the more class diversity and more use of offensive buffs and offensive debuffs you layer at the appropriate times and stack prior to um, prior to big burn phases when everyone is doing as much damage as possible. Get up long bleeds that will last throughout the duration, or at least the majority of it. Get up group buffs that will, or that will be reset by Call to Greatness, if you're going to be using it during a burn phase, or after one. Um, and get up your offensive buffs, do the right thing. Do not just like open up with as much damage as possible, or just start pre-healing the tank unnecessarily whenever they can just run in using Juggernaut or uh, like Feather Blows or Shield of the Dunedain, Thickened Hide. They'll be fine at the beginning. And in DPS race fights especially, don't need to focus nearly on as much on group survivability um, as you do on preparing for allowing the DPS to really blow things up at the beginning. And then same thing applies later on, like 90 seconds later, after renewed defenses has expired. And in some fights, even sooner than that, because vulnerability windows um, will occur for, or priority targets will come in that you need to have a plan for.
Thank you everyone so much. I want to thank Sape for taking all of his time to prepare for us and to share this with us. As the link to part 1 of the series will be in the description below, so go ahead and click on that. And if you'd like to join us on Glamdring in Mithril Academy and Inkredibles University, then the link to that Discord server will also be in the description below. And thanks everyone for watching, and as always, happy hunting.